Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hey there, welcome back to Unbound. Today, we're talking about something that sounds almost poetic, but it's actually really sad. And that's the moment your mom looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize herself. Not in a metaphorical, I don't know who I've become kind of way, you know? I mean, literally, like she looks at her reflection and asks, who is that old woman? This chapter is called The Stranger in the Mirror. And it's about what neurologists call the mirror sign. And that's when people with dementia lose the ability to recognize their own reflection. Can you even imagine? It happens in about 30 to 40% of people with moderate to advanced dementia. And it reveals something pretty profound about how we construct our sense of self. Here's the thing, though, like when my mom asks who that old woman is, she's not just confused. She's actually expressing a disconnect between how she feels inside, still maybe young and vibrant. She's pretty shocked sometimes when she learns that she's 75, and the reality of what 75 years looks like in a mirror. And honestly, it's not just a dementia thing. It's a human thing. Dementia just kind of magnifies it and makes it somewhat impossible to reconcile. For me, turning 50 did the same damn thing. Anyway, let's talk about identity, aging, self-recognition, and what kind of remains when the mirror stops showing you who you think you are. This is chapter 25 in the book, The Stranger in the Mirror. My visits with Mom follow a familiar rhythm now. I typically find her in her room at Willow Grove, often lying in bed, sometimes dozing when I arrive. She perks up when I announce my presence, her eyes finding mine with that momentary pause before recognition settles in. Most days I try to coax her out of her room. A change of scenery seems to lift her spirits and provide gentle stimulation that breaks the monotony of her daily routine. Let's go downstairs to the lobby, I suggest on this particular day, noticing that she seems more alert than usual. The sun is coming through those big windows and it's nice and quiet today. She nods her head in agreement, and we begin our pre-outing ritual. Before venturing into public spaces, I always help her freshen up. A quick stop in the bathroom, a brush through her hair, sometimes a touch of lipstick if she's in the mood for it. These small acts of grooming seem to center her, preparing her for the transition from private to shared space. In the bathroom, I stand behind her as she sits on her walker in front of the mirror, gently working a brush through her white hair. The fluorescent lighting is harsh, but the mirror above the sink reflects both our faces clearly. Mine focused on the task at hand, hers watching the brush move rhythmically through her hair. Then something shifts in her expression. Her eyes narrow, her head tilts slightly, and she leans forward toward the mirror. "Who is that old woman?" she asks, her voice holding genuine curiosity rather than distress. The question catches me off guard. "That's you, Mom," I answer gently. "You were just fixing your hair before we go downstairs." She shakes her head slightly, unconvinced. "No, that can't be right. She looks so old." "Well, you're almost 75 now," I remind her, continuing to brush with steady strokes. She stares at her reflection with increasing intensity, as if trying to reconcile what she sees with what she feels. "But I don't feel 75 in here," she taps her temple. "I'm in here. I'm still young." This moment, this disconnect between inner experience and outer reality, represents one of dementia's most poignant and least understood phenomena, the mirror sign. It's a telling symptom that reveals profound truths about how we construct our sense of self and what happens when the cognitive mechanisms supporting that construction begin to fail. The mirror sign refers to the inability to recognize one's own reflection, a symptom that occurs in approximately 30 to 40% of people with moderate to advanced dementia. Unlike many dementia symptoms that develop gradually, mirror recognition often seems to fail abruptly, present one day, gone the next. One morning, a person recognizes themselves without issue. The next, they might accuse that stranger of following them around or watching them in the bathroom. In the neurological literature, the mirror sign is classified as a type of agnosia, specifically a failure of self-recognition. It differs from face blindness, which involves difficulty recognizing all faces, including one's own. With the mirror sign, the issue isn't an an inability to perceive faces generally, but rather a specific disconnection between the visual image in the mirror and one's internal sense of self. Researchers specializing in neurocognitive disorders at Tohoku University explain that the mirror recognition involves a complex interplay of cognitive functions. To recognize oneself in a mirror requires not just visual processing, but also an updated self-image, autobiographical memory, and the ability to understand the representational nature of reflections. When dementia disrupts these interconnected processes, the person looking back from the mirror may become a stranger. What makes this phenomenon particularly fascinating and heartbreaking is what it reveals about our internal self-image. When Mom questioned who that old woman was, she wasn't experiencing random confusion. She was expressing a profound disconnect between how she perceives herself internally and the reality of her physical appearance. Inside, she still feels like a younger version of herself, perhaps the vibrant woman in her 30s or 40s, raising children, active in church, full of energy and purpose. The internal self-image seems remarkably persistent even as memory fades. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that many people with dementia maintain a self-concept that corresponds to an earlier life period, often their 30s to 50s, ages typically associated with peak productivity and established identity. The researchers suggested that this frozen self-image might represent the brain's attempt to maintain identity coherence as other cognitive functions decline. For families navigating this symptom, the mirror sign represents yet another emotionally complex terrain to traverse. When Mom looks in the mirror and sees a stranger, she's experiencing a genuine disconnect, not confusion to be corrected, but an alternative perceptual reality to be understood and respected. Let me show you something, I say to Mom, reaching for my phone. I pull up a photograph on my Facebook from about 15 years ago. Mom in her early 60s, smiling at the camera. This is you about 15 years ago. She studies the image, her failing vision adding another complicated layer to seeing photos, nodding slowly. Yes, that's me. Then I gently direct her attention back to the mirror. And this is you now, 15 years later. She looks between the photograph and the mirror, making connections, building a bridge between her internal image and the reflection before her. I've gotten old, she says simply, a statement of fact rather than distress. We all do, Mom. She smiles at that, meeting my eyes in the mirror. You haven't yet. I will, I assure her, finishing the last strokes through her hair, hopefully. This approach, using photographs to create a visual timeline, sometimes helps bridge the gap between internal self-image and current appearance. The key is not to contradict or correct, but to provide context that helps make sense of the disconnect. Dr. Cameron Camp, Director of Research at the Center for Applied Research in Dementia, recommends what he calls external memory aids to help with mirror recognition. Photographs from different life stages, arranged chronologically, can help create a visual narrative that brings the person's internal image closer to their current appearance, he explains. It's not about forcing recognition, but about offering supportive cues that help bridge past and present. Some care facilities have experimented with placing personalized signs near mirrors with simple messages like, "This is Mary," or "Hello, John, this is you." While seemingly simplistic, these environmental cues can provide reassurance during moments of disconnection. Other facilities have found that improving lighting around mirrors and ensuring they're positioned at appropriate heights can reduce misidentification issues. For many families, the mirror sign becomes a metaphor for the larger journey of dementia, a visible manifestation of the invisible cognitive changes taking place. It represents the gradual untethering of self from body, of internal experience from external reality, of past from present. Yet it also reveals something profound about human identity, how our sense of self persists even when other cognitive functions falter. As we prepare to leave Mom's room for our lobby visit, she glances at the mirror one last time, recognition restored for the moment. "My hair looks nice," she comments, patting it lightly. "Thank you." The mirror sign doesn't manifest consistently. Even people who frequently experience it might have periods of normal self-recognition interspersed with episodes of misidentification. For Mom, these episodes seem to occur most often when she's tired or when the transition between sleep and wakefulness has left her more disoriented than usual. She doesn't find these episodes particularly distressing, at least not yet. Unlike some people with dementia who become frightened or angry at their reflection, accusing this stranger of intrusion or watching them, Mom responds with curiosity rather than fear. This likely reflects her lifelong personality, her openness to new experiences, her adaptability in the face of change, and her ability to find humor in unlikely situations. Some families report much more challenging experiences with the mirror sign. A woman in my support group described how her husband became convinced that a man was living in their bathroom, watching him through the mirror. He would have conversations with this other man, sometimes friendly, sometimes confrontational. Another group member shared how her mother would apply makeup to help the poor old woman in the mirror look better, having no idea she was seeing herself. The diversity of responses to the mirror sign highlights an important truth about dementia. While the neurological changes may follow certain patterns, how these changes manifest behaviorally depends enormously on individual personality, life history, and emotional resilience. The disease doesn't erase who a person is at their core. It transforms how that core self is expressed through increasingly limited cognitive channels. Research on the mirror sign has revealed intriguing patterns in how self-recognition fails and what this tells us about human identity. Some studies show that mirror recognition often fails in a specific sequence. Typically, people first fail to recognize their aged appearance, then their identity altogether, and finally the very concept of what a mirror does. This progression suggests that our recognition system works in layers. The first layer to fail is typically the connection between our internal age image and our current appearance. This is what Mom experienced when she questioned who that old woman was. She recognized she was seeing a person but couldn't reconcile the elderly appearance with her internal self-concept. The second layer involves recognizing the reflection as oneself, regardless of appearance, understanding that's me, even if surprising or unfamiliar. When this fails, the person may believe they're seeing someone else entirely, a stranger, an intruder, or sometimes a familiar person from their past. The third and deepest layer involves understanding the nature of mirrors themselves, that they show reflections rather than windows or portals. In advanced stages of dementia, this fundamental understanding may disappear, leading to attempts to interact with the person in the mirror as if they were physically present in the room. Neuroimaging studies have shown that self-recognition activates specific brain regions, particularly in the right hemisphere. The right prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe work together to integrate visual information with our internal self model. When dementia affects these areas, as it often does in conditions like Alzheimer's disease or frontotemporal dementia, the neural basis for self-recognition becomes compromised. But the mirror sign isn't just neurologically fascinating, it's emotionally profound. It represents one of the deepest existential challenges of dementia, the question of who we are when our appearance, abilities, and memories no longer align with our internal sense of self. When Mom looks in the mirror and asks, who is that old woman, she's expressing a universal human experience, the surprise of aging, albeit through the particular lens of cognitive decline. As we make our way down to the Willow Grove lobby, Mom holding her walker for support, I find myself thinking about the larger implications of the mirror moment we just shared. The disconnect between her internal self-image and her reflection represents a universal human experience magnified by dementia. Don't we all, at some point, look in the mirror and feel a moment of disconnect? The surprise of a new wrinkle, the shock of gray hair, the gradual transformation of our faces and bodies over time. These changes can sometimes feel like they're happening to someone else, not to the person we feel ourselves to be inside. The difference is that most of us can quickly integrate these changes into an updated self-image. We think, yes, I'm getting older, but I'm still me. We maintain continuity between past and present selves through our autobiographical memory and cognitive flexibility. When dementia disrupts these processes, that integration becomes difficult or impossible. The person in the mirror becomes a stranger because the cognitive tools for updating and maintaining a coherent self-concept are failing. This perspective helps me approach Mom's mirror moments with greater empathy. When she doesn't recognize herself, she's not being confused in some abstract sense. She's experiencing a specific type of disconnect between her internal reality and external appearance. By understanding this, I can respond more effectively, providing context and reassurance without contradiction or correction. Some days, acknowledging this disconnect leads to meaningful conversations about aging and identity. I don't feel old inside, Mom will say, a sentiment echoed by countless aging adults with or without dementia. This creates an opportunity to explore how our inner experience of self often remains remarkably consistent, even as our bodies change dramatically over decades. Other days, the mirror moments pass quickly, forgotten as soon as we move on to something else. The fluidity of memory in dementia means that distressing incidents often fade rapidly, though they may leave emotional residue even when the specific event can't be recalled. On those days, simple redirection works best, moving toward activities that reinforce her sense of competence and connection rather than highlighting disconnection. The mirror sign also reminds me of the importance of how we communicate about identity and aging with people who have dementia. Using phrases like "you're still the same person inside" or "you're still mom, just older now" can provide reassuring continuity. Sharing photographs from different life stages can help create visual anchors for the journey from past to present self. At the same time, it's crucial to recognize that forcing self-recognition can sometimes create unnecessary distress. If mom is convinced that her reflection is someone else and doesn't find this upsetting, insisting that she recognize herself may create more confusion than clarity. In those moments, gentle redirection often works better than correction. Some families find creative ways to manage mirror-related distress. Covering mirrors during difficult periods, improving lighting to reduce shadowy or distorted reflections, or placing familiar objects near mirrors as orientation cues can all help reduce misidentification issues. In more advanced cases, some care facilities remove mirrors entirely from private spaces while maintaining them in areas where staff can provide support during potentially confusing moments. In the months since that first significant mirror incident, I've noticed patterns when mom is more or less likely to recognize herself. Mornings tend to be more difficult, especially if she's just woken up. The transition from sleep to wakefulness seems to make self-recognition particularly challenging. Good lighting makes a significant difference, as does her general mood and energy level. I've learned to watch for the slight narrowing of eyes, the tilt of her head that signals she's processing a disconnect between what she sees and what she expects to see. When I notice these signs, I now have strategies ready: a photograph to provide context, a gentle comment about how well she looks today, or sometimes simply moving past the mirror moment without drawing attention to it. Today, as we settle into a sunny spot in the Willow Grove lobby, Mom seems to have completely forgotten our bathroom mirror interaction. She's engaged with the present moment, watching residents and staff move through the space, commenting on the flower arrangement on the coffee table, asking about crew. This, too, is characteristic of how dementia affects the experience of self. The disorienting mirror moments may be intense when they occur, but often leave little trace in conscious memory. The emotional residue might linger, a vague sense of confusion or disconnection, but the specific incident fades quickly, replaced by whatever captures attention in the present moment. As we sit together in comfortable silence, I find myself reflecting on how the mirror sign encapsulates so much of dementia, the journey, the gradual untethering of self from its familiar anchors, the persistence of an internal identity, even as external recognition falters, and the need to find new ways of connecting across changing perceptual realities. It also highlights what remains when cognitive function declines. Even when Mom doesn't recognize her reflection, she maintains her essential character, her curiosity rather than fear in the face of the unexpected, her ability to find humor in confusing situations, and her willingness to trust me as a guide when her own perceptions seem unreliable. The Kathy who looks in the mirror and asks, "Who is that old woman?" is still very much herself in the ways that matter the most, in her emotional responses, her values, and in how she engages with the world around her. Self-recognition may falter, but selfhood persists, albeit in an altered form. In this way, the mirror sign offers both a challenge and reassurance for families on the dementia journey. The challenge lies in navigating the disconnect between how our loved ones see themselves and how they appear to us, in finding ways to bridge perceptual gaps without creating unnecessary distress. The reassurance comes in recognizing that core personhood remains even when cognitive function changes, that who someone essentially is transcends what they can remember or recognize. Mom may not always know her reflection, but I still see her clearly in her expressions, her gestures, the particular way she tilts her head when listening, the distinctive cadence of her laughter. The mirror may show her a stranger, but to me she remains unmistakably herself. Changed by dementia, yes, but still fundamentally the woman who raised me, taught me to see beyond surfaces to the essential person beneath. As we prepare to return to her room later in the visit, Mom catches a glimpse of herself in the window reflection and pauses briefly. But this time there's no confusion, no questioning. Perhaps the different angle, the different context, the different lighting all contribute to this moment of recognition. Or perhaps it's simply the fluctuating nature of cognitive function in dementia, the unpredictable windows of clarity that open and close without warning. "Ready to go upstairs?" I ask, not drawing attention to the reflective moment. She nods, taking my arm. "Yes, it's been a nice day." And in this statement, simple, present, focused, appreciative, I hear echoes of who she has always been, someone who could find contentment in small pleasures, who could move past confusion toward connection, and discover meaning even in the midst of loss. The mirror might sometimes show her a stranger, but in these moments of clarity and connection, I glimpse the familiar soul behind the changing face. All right, so let's chat a little. So yeah, we were getting ready to head downstairs and, helping mom clean up a little bit in the bathroom, and she leaned towards the glass and she just kind of stared at herself with this intense, like I didn't know what was coming. um, but because something was clearly not lining up for her, and I felt it before she spoke, and then when she asked, like genuinely puzzled who the old lady was, um, it was odd. It was a new one for me. For her, it wasn't fear, it wasn't embarrassment. It was just like she saw this unfamiliar person and asked who it was. She says that a lot sometimes when someone comes up to talk to us or something at Willow Grove and she's not sure who it is, she'll ask who the person is. So, yeah, when I told her that she was looking at herself and she didn't argue, she just couldn't reconcile that. Yeah, it's she still feels young and energetic, and her brain is kind of anchored to that version of herself, not the current one. Um, yeah, so that it has the clinical name, like I said, but what matters to me isn't so much the terminology, it's kinda what it reveals more than anything. It's just another fascinating thing to learn about. Dementia, it doesn't just take memories, it kind of breaks that link between the inner self and the outside world, and mom's sense of identity is still alive and well, it's just not tethered to, the aging body that she's got, that was looking at her in the mirror, Her mind hasn't really updated the mental portrait in years, and now the gap between, her inner age and her outer appearance is wide enough to get lost in, if that makes sense. So, I showed her a picture. I think I showed her a couple of pictures actually, and it gave her a bit of a stepping stone, kind of a way to move from that internal image to the external one without feeling like all twisted around and disoriented. It didn't feel like a stranger anymore so much, it was just her later in life. So it was more of a continuation, instead of like an intrusion. Fortunately, these mirror moments don't linger for her. When it passes, it's gone. I have not seen it very often since. You know, but it is what it is, and this disconnect that she feels is just something that we all kind of brush against eventually. Like I said, when I turned 50, like I'm seeing, more changes in my face, and it's weird. It's a lot like when I lost weight and I just didn't recognize who I was. Like I'd spent literally my entire life, at minimum obese, but a huge portion of it straight through my adulthood, gravely obese. And when I lost literally half of myself, I didn't recognize the person I was looking at in the mirror. And that was a trip. And I could reconcile it. Like I knew, there was a process I had gone through and I had changed a lot. And, but dementia, like aging is disorienting enough, and changing, like the body changes that I went through, that's disorienting enough. But dementia just kind of removes that filter that lets us, um, negotiate with our own changes, right? Like I was able to do that. Um, so without that ability to do that, the truth kind of hits all at once. The outside looks older than the inside feels, and the mismatch can be startling, even for the rest of us. Um, Forcing recognition doesn't really help. Mom needs context and reassurance, and sometimes we just need to move past the mirror altogether. It's not to, the goal isn't to make her see what I see, but to help her feel grounded and supported and safe when her brain is giving her this kind of incomplete information, if that makes sense. But yeah, later in the visit, no memory. She was cheerful and engaged, asking questions, commenting on people walking by. Like that confusion didn't stick around, and that was good. But it attaches more to me, if I'm honest, that kind of ache in my heart of kind of watching this happen to my mom, when she doesn't recognize herself, I do. So, that counts, not in the mirror, but in who she is, and all those other little things that remind me and tell me who she is. Before we wrap up, I I again want to thank by name a few people: Tracy, Kyle, Chris, Nate, Aggie, Jimmy, Elena, Mr. B, Trey S, and Howie for supporting the show this week on Coffee. Your support, again, makes this possible. Thank you. I'm giving away this work for free and always will. There's absolutely no pressure to support because I believe these stories need to be accessible to everybody who wants to access them. But there are real costs behind hosting, doing a podcast. There's, the hosting, the audio engineering, the time, the background players, all of that kind of stuff. So if you've gotten value from Unbound and you're able, please consider supporting me at ko-fi.com/Unbound podcast. Every bit of support keeps this going. I will do my very, very best to keep it going even without support. So I just want to be completely clear on that. Yeah. So thanks for listening to Unbound. If this episode, was hard, if it resonated, please talk to us. You can check out the show notes for any contact and show support information. Links are all there. Email, join the Facebook group for discussion, and I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/Unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.